Hi, I'm Suneera Madhani, and I'm a mom of two, a daughter of an immigrant, and an unlikely entrepreneur who went from scaling an idea to $1 billion business. Yes, $1 billion business. Along the way, I learned that less than 2% of female founders ever hit 1 million in revenue, and I became obsessed on a mission to change that. I believe that there is so much gatekeeping in business knowledge, and that we as female entrepreneurs should be learning from other female founders and leaders who have broken the statistics. Since I never went to CEO school, I've had to learn it all the hard way, but you shouldn't have to, because we believe that you deserve to have it all. And honestly, nothing bad happens when women make more money. Grab a seat because class is officially in session. Welcome to CEO School. So now that you have your media kit and all of your bios and everything reflected, we're ready to rock. So what's next? We're going to put together a dream PR list, right? And I want you to think big. I want you to think small as well. And I want you to create a list of places that you want to get featured in. Podcasts, shows, blogs, places you want to be a guest on, right? It's also important to think about not just from we think about PR sometimes just in magazine format or podcast format. There's also so many websites, other people's social media that we want to get mentioned in. So really think big and let's create a list and let's divide up that list. I'd love for you to have your dream list, so we can call that your A list, but I also want you to have maybe a tier 2 and a tier 3 so that we could start checking them off across our different channels. So here's a quick example that I've just put up on the screen of dream podcasts that I have not. Some of them I've been on, some of them I still want to get on, right? Featured media that I want to be in, speaking engagements, etc. And I'm always evolving that list to ensure that we're checking those things off. What's really exciting is once you have your list, there's so much opportunity for you to use that, to leverage that to be on other platforms as well. So we'll dive into that later in our PR strategy format. But first, I want you to put together that list so we could start building those media relationships. And trust me, you don't need a PR company to do so. When we think about PR, I want you to think about this incredible model that Jeannie Dietrich did called the PESO model. The PESO model includes different categories of media and different categories of PR. So we have paid media, like ads, sponsored posts, etc. We have shared media, like social media shares, podcast shares, other people mentioning you. You have earned media, right? Which is what we think about in PR, which is featured media, articles, shout outs, tier 1 publications, etc. And then you have owned media. We forget about this one, is your own blog, your social presence, places that you own in your media. So we're going to cover these 4 areas and how you can get started on checking them across the list. And so we're going to get started on learning about these 4 areas and checking through to make sure that you have all 4 covered in your PR strategy. So first, earned media, right? Traditional features in press, blogs, magazines, word of mouth, even online reviews and affiliates are earned media. Any third-party opinion of your brand, right? So whether it's social mentions, UGC, or reviews are all in the earned category. And they're often overlooked when we're submitting yourself for things like even industry awards, right? So earned media is such an easy way for you to think about all the places that we want third parties to validate us. Right. And so as we created that list, don't forget about blogs in your industry, magazines in your industry. So a great area or like a great tip that I like to give when you're like, where I just want to be, because all we think about is like the top publications, right? So you want to be on Inc., you want to be on Forbes, you want to be on these lists, but what is that actually going to drive your business? And when we think about PR strategy, yes, those things might drive credibility, but I will tell you that those publications that I've been on haven't really moved the needle in terms of business revenue. Areas that have like completely changed the game in terms of driving business revenue were like very specific industry trade publications for us when I was at Stacks. And so I want you to think about and do a quick Google search on your industry. Think about a competitor that you really admire and see where they've been featured, right? Who's talking about your competitors? Because if they're talking about your competitors, guess what? They should be talking about you. So when we're thinking about the earned media category, I want you to spend some time in not only thinking through the top tier publications, but I want you to think about different places that your competitors are mentioned? What are the different websites? What are different, review channels, etc., that can mention and talk about your product or service? One of our biggest earned media opportunities that drove the most amount of business was we were featured on, and we're still featured on, a Forbes list for the best credit card processors, right? We've been mentioned in Forbes and Inc. dozens of times, but when we were on that list, and it was actually a review, they actually did a comparison of us against Stripe and PayPal and others, and they listed the top 10 credit card processing companies, and it was actually like a review, like a full-on review that consumers can go to and then make a buying decision to say, oh, I want to choose this credit card processing company. That article itself drove the most amount of leads every single month for us, right? And that's because we had earned that spot, not only in the PR side of them telling the founder story and talking about us, but truly it was a product review. Right? So don't forget to think about where your product and or service should be reviewed. What are the things that you want your customers to say about us? And even your reviews about your product on Google, on Amazon, or about your product or service, those are also online reviews. Customers go and search for those things. And we want people to be saying amazing things about your product, your company, and your service. These are all areas of earned media opportunity. So I want you to take a moment in that category to come back and fill those places out. And a great place to do it is just by doing some quick Google searches. The next thing I want you to think about is your own media, right? This is your own media that you're able to publish. Do you have a blog yet on your website? Your podcast, do you have one? Do you do thought leadership articles, white papers, videos talking about your product, educational content, case studies, ebooks, even your website, right? If you contribute to your own areas of media, these are all things that the third-party world can then credit you for as the expert, right? And they can take that content and say, hey, we got this off of CEO School's podcast, right? And then we're the thought leader in this area. And so you want to ensure that you also have an own media strategy. We can't just rely on other people to tell our own story, right? And so when was the last time you actually thought about having your podcast, having the thought leadership articles, right? And these are the things that you can actually contribute to other places. So having a blog is definitely something that is such a great strategy for overall marketing and demand gen for your company. Now, you might not have all the resources to do it on day one, but even if you decide to do one article per week that you publish, right? And it could be, adjacent to like what your customers' pain points are. You could be a thought leader in your industry and have articles that people want to share about. There are so many resources that you can go and do quick Google searches on what are actually your customers searching for. That is a great place for you to think about what you should be writing about, right? What you should be speaking about, what you should be a thought leader on, right? And all of that is your own owned media, right? And it's so important for you to have. And you can start small and you can expand upon that strategy. And so for us, our podcast is our own media for CEO School, right? And we take this podcast and we turn it into several pieces of content that go across our social platforms, that go across our blog and our website, that go across for mentions and everything else. An area that for us to continue to add are more thought leadership, right? So I do thought leadership and I'm a contributor to content sites, right? Like Forbes and YEC and Inc., where they want my thoughts when it comes to women in business. I didn't just earn that spot on day one. They were like, let's think about, who we're going to go ask for. I've been writing about this topic for years, right? On my own owned media. And so when there's a thought leadership that's needed, I could say, hey, Forbes, I'd love to contribute an article that I'm writing about the lack of funding for women and that less than 2% of female founders ever break $1 million in revenue. I'm writing this piece. I thought I was going to write it for my website, but I think that you guys would love to have it. And guess what? They wanted to pick up the piece. And just by that simple pitch with my media kit and pitching what I'm writing the article about, Forbes wanted to pick up that contributed content. Well, guess what? Once it's up on the contributed content, I can then take that content and then repurpose it into my blog after. Repurpose it into a podcast after. Repurpose it into into a video series after, right? And so think about when you're writing content, don't just think about, we're constantly in this hamster wheel of writing content. I want you to be strategic with your content, right? And I want you to be the thought leader in your industry. So when you pick your lane, I want you to say, here's where we're going to own the media. And I want you to start wherever you're going to start, whether it's a blog, whether it's a podcast, whether it's just a few articles or an ebook that you're going to write. Every single company, every single entrepreneur needs to have some own media that belongs to you with your voice. The next piece of this is shared media, right? And so shared media, when, especially when we're thinking about building out our bio or building out our media kit, so many women come to me and they say, well, I haven't been featured on this podcast. I haven't been featured. Well, where have you been featured, right? Shared media is so fantastic, and social media is a great way to get shared media. And I would reach out to brands. Do not forget that you can also pitch yourself. The amount of guests that we get for CEO School, we have an online application where people submit their bios or why they should be on the show, and our podcast team then goes through and selects people. But honestly, half of the people that come through are cold pitches that I get from people that have pitched to me online. And they send me a DM, or they say, hey, I'd really love to talk about this topic, or they send an email, and their email is concise, it's clear, it tells me why they're the expert, tells me why that they're credible, and that why this topic is of interest to me for my podcast. At the end of the day, you have to remember that everybody is in it for themselves. Now, I'm going to say this in like what's in it for me, right? And you have to put yourself outside of that seat and say, what's in it for Suneera when she's thinking about a guest for CEO School? What's in it for that magazine when they're looking for that contributed article about soaps when you want to talk about your product, your soap product, right? So I want you to think about what's in it for them, not what's in it for you, because that person is thinking about what's in it for me. What's in it for me is that, I have a fantastic guest, and I know I have a workshop coming up on PR, and it'd be great to get a PR expert, right? So as soon as this article goes live, or as soon as this workshop goes live, I just posted it on social media. And guess what? If somebody sent me a DM today, I was posting up on my stories and I'm doing a PR workshop. If a PR expert that has a PR agency said, hey, Suneera, I saw that you're doing a workshop, I would love to come on the podcast and do media training for your audience. Guess what? I would be so likely to respond because it's relevant, it's what I need, and they've pitched themselves and positioned themselves perfectly. So it's so important to pay attention. It's not just through like the perfect email cadence. It's also important to see what's happening in the world, right? That could be relevant to that brand or what they need at that moment. So don't discount social media. Don't discount pitching yourself. I will tell you, it's all about relevancy, and it's also all about timing as well. Keep it concise and get in the room. Lastly, I want to talk about paid media. This is where people assume that you have to pay for placement. Guess what? In 10 years as CEO of Stacks, I never once paid for media placement, ever. I paid for a PR agency, but I never paid for paid media placement for me to become a featured speaker somewhere, or for me to be on the cover of this, or to have an article piece. There are many strategies that I've seen that you can, and you've probably gotten so many DMs about people saying, pay for the PR, we'll get you an article in, Yahoo or Inc. or what was it? Yahoo Finance. I've seen that one so many times, right? And it has nothing to do with your industry type. You don't want to be paying for media that's not relevant to your industry. So first, I want to make sure that you get that message across. You don't need to pay for media. Where you need to pay for media, I would say is on promoting the media, right? Or promoting a specific story on social media campaigns, on retargeting, on Google Ads. When you are featured in something, or when you have a really amazing thought leadership webinar that you did, and you want to use that and use paid media to share that, that's an amazing place to put your dollars, right? To promote that. And I will tell you that you don't need to pay for that person to say, pay $5,000 and we'll get you an article in Entrepreneur. Do not do that. People can see right through that. It'll show that it's contributed content. There are other ways to gain that credibility and to reach out to Entrepreneur, or to find different ways to get into the dream publications that you want to be in. It's all about relationship building. And so where I would spend my dollars is on sharing the media. I would spend my dollars on marketing. I would spend my dollars on advertising to go drive sales, not necessarily on buying placements. Okay. So I just want to share that. I want you to know that it could be really, really, really tempting. And I know you want it so bad, but there is no shortcut here. Okay. And the shortcut is going to be, even if you get it, it's like It's like buying those followers, right? How many times that if you are on social media and you're trying to grow your following, you get the countless DMs to say, buy those followers, and it's tempting, right? Especially when you're starting off and you're early and you're like, man, I just want that credibility. I just want that check mark. Well, it's not going to serve you in the long run, right? Hard work is a shortcut. There are no shortcuts to this, but trust me, follow along this process and you will have everyone raving and talking about you shortly. I want you to save those dollars and I want you to put it towards growing your company, right? And that is what PR is about. So those are 4 different areas that you can think about PR from. And now we're going to go into how to actually think about creating a PR strategy that is right for you. Thank you for tuning into today's show. If you loved it, leave us a review. We are so proud to bring you authentic conversations, game changer expert guests, and valuable content on and offline. The best compliment you can give us is by screenshotting today's show and tagging us on Instagram at CEO School and at Suneera Madhani. We are obsessed with swag, so don't be surprised if we want to send you some. Thanks for tuning into class today, and remember, nothing bad happens when women make more money.